Well, I have 3 o'clock. Janice, are you ready to begin?
I am.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and do the introduction. Thank you all for joining the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities informational webinar, FCSUA portal, FPCTP startup, and enhancement grants. My name is Drew Andrews. I am the Assistant Director and Technical Assistance Coordinator at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. Our presenters today are Janice Seabrooks Blackmore, Executive Director and Professor, myself, Assistant Director and Technical Assistance Coordinator, and Claudia Balopunto, Web Developer, all with the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities at the University of Central Florida. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website under the Events tab for your review at a later date or to share with someone who is unable to attend. The PowerPoint and other handouts can be downloaded from the chat section, which can be accessed by clicking on the chat icon. And if you'll take your cursor and move to the bottom of the Zoom screen, you see different icons. And if you click on the chat box, a chat box will appear over to the right. And that's where we're going to be posting a copy of the PowerPoint slides for today, as well as any other handouts, along with other information. If you have difficulty hearing the presentation, phone numbers that can be used to call and join via phone will also be posted in that chat window. At the end of the webinar, you will be directed to our evaluation, and a link will be in the chat window. So please complete the evaluation so we will have your input when planning future webinars. So at this time, let's get started.
And I will share. And Drew, do you want to control with you starting?
Now, you can share. And
okay. Okay, let's see. There we go.
There we go. So again, the title of our webinar today is the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities portal. And we're talking about Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Startup and Enhancement Grants. Next slide. So we're going to be giving an overview of the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act and the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. Along with that, we're going to be providing information on supplemental material requirements in the grant portal and really how to use that FCSUA portal for grants only. So our previous webinar was on the program applications, and today is on grant proposals. So the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Act was signed into law on January 21st, 2016, and became effective July 1, 2016. And there's the Florida statute number on the slide. There are 4 parts to the act. It established the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities at the University of Central Florida. Second, it established the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs and the structure for those programs. It also provides funds for scholarships for students to attend approved programs. And the final part, there were funds for startup and enhancement grants to institutions of higher education to support the programs that they had established. All of the programs must be approved programs before a grant can be approved. So the program application must be first, and then, as we're talking about today, the startup and enhancement grants. So, the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities is working with IHEs throughout the state, and there are 120 of them that are eligible IHEs to facilitate the application, submission, and approval process to become a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program. We're also providing scholarship awards to eligible students to attend an approved program. And finally, we're working with them to provide grant funding to foster starting up new and are enhancing existing post-secondary education programs for students with intellectual disabilities. So there are both startup grants and enhancement grants. So Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs, and this is just a brief review for you, focus on employment outcomes. All of the programs must be inclusive and have an inclusive context. Students must participate at no less than half-time enrollment. So if at your college or university, 12 hours is considered full-time, students must be enrolled at least 6 hours each semester. Programs must also provide a meaningful credential or an industry certifications. Students must be leaving with some type of credential or certification that they're going to be able to use whenever they're seeking employment. It also requires the definition of satisfactory academic progress. So students, just as with any college-age student, students enrolled in post-secondary education, students must make satisfactory academic progress. Another requirement of the legislation is that the federal comprehensive transition and post-secondary program application must be completed within the first year when your program is established. Many people call this CTP for Comprehensive Transition Program, and this is done through your financial aid office, and it allows students to access federal financial aid just as other students do. So the eligible institutions, those that can establish a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program, include both public and private IHEs that are not-for-profit and that are accredited. Those may be universities, state and community colleges, career tech centers, which are oftentimes called technical colleges in the state, and also private colleges. And as I mentioned earlier, there are 120 eligible institutions, and additional information on that can be found on our website under Find a Post-Secondary Program. There's a list of the eligible institutions.
And you will probably hear us continue to reiterate about the need to be an approved program in order to apply for or to actually have a FPCTP application to apply for the grant in the process of being a new one or enhancing one. So the request for proposal that you can also find on our website outlines the details regarding how to apply for those funds, and with the focus on increasing the number and the availability of approved Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition programs across the state. We are edging that way as we go into year 4. So we are really just asking you to continue to pass the word on as you learn more about the programs and the grants. And that's what our focus is today, is really reiterating that we have 2 types of grants. And you are encouraged to write different proposals depending on where you are. If you're a startup, you will write a startup proposal. If you are a brand new program or interested in becoming a brand new approved FPCTP, this is to help with the development of getting started and moving your program forward. And if you are looking for additional dollars to help with an existing post-secondary education program, then you will ask for, or your proposal will be written for an enhancement grant. So either it's a new startup one or it will be an enhancement. The RFP pretty much is similar for both. However, you have slightly different information. Those who are an existing program and you are applying for enhancement funds, then additional information about your student outcomes will be requested on that and within that proposal narrative. We want to talk about some timelines in which we work. We do work on a fiscal year timeline looking at July 1 through June 30th. So that's what we define as an academic year. While we have institutions who are career tech centers, state colleges, universities, maybe on different timelines, we all kind of pretty much understand the fiscal component, the fiscal year area. And so the academic years may be different, but we work from July 1 through June 30th. And in the grant budget proposals, that's kind of defined in there as you work through those proposals. A visual, again, part of the information that you will find on our website has the funding cycle. As you look at the funding cycle, depends on when you are actually requesting funds to support your program, whether it be startup grant or enhancement grant. As you look at that first column, the earliest project start date and go across that row depends on when you actually submit your proposal. And so as we look at the submission date, that will determine when or the earliest that grants funding could be released and how long your project will actually last. Where you see there, depending on when you submit, you might have a funding cycle of 3 years and 6 months. And so it's still going to be July 1st as the beginning of a fiscal year or academic year through June 30th. But you may have those extra 3 months. If you look at that last column and you're submitting between April and June, you would actually start up in January. So you have a few months to kind of get started before that July 1st fiscal year begins. Some of you have joined us on different webinars, and we know that we have our funding has been revisited. And for your grant proposals, you can actually request a budget up to $300,000 per year. You also have the option to request that the funds be for 1 to 3 year time period. But there cannot be any more than $300,000 per year as you look at that, with the maximum being $900,000. And so as you move through it, that's something that you want to think about is if you're a startup, if you're requesting a startup grant in particular, how long do you need to get that development underway? Is it 1 year or up to 3 years to get up under your belt? If you are a technical center, career technical center, the nice thing about those that there are more than one in a particular district, each technical college is considered an institution. So within a district, multiple technical colleges can apply for one of the FPCTP grants. So keep that in mind. And I know we have a district or two that are actually considering that. We'll look at some of the required files that you'll need to submit once we get into the portal. Of course, some narrative to talk about, address some of the components you'll see within the instructions to lay out what it is that you're proposing, number of students you're thinking about, what type of staff you're looking at. You will write up a proposal about your particular startup or enhancement grant. With that, we'll look at each one of these as we go in the portal. You'll look at a logic model outlining what your outcomes are, looking at your goals, your long-term, short-term goals, and how you anticipate those happening. A grant evaluation table to look at formative through summative evaluation, how you will actually determine whether those outcomes have been met. An itemized budget, of course, which is a biggie and one that we work through with many institutions a lot. And then your budget justification that will accompany that. References that have been used, references for citations that have been used in your narrative is also part of the files that you will submit, but they will not be required when we think about the actual documents that must be submitted in order for your proposal to be allowed to submit within in the portal. But we'll go over those. When we get into the portal, we're going to look at becoming familiar with the portal. We'll walk through looking at what that looks like, and then where you would upload documents. And the nice thing about the portal is we can take all types of files. What you will load up, we ask that they be the original Word and Excel files. Our final document, when the grants are approved, will be a PDF. You may also have some PDF files that may be letters of that, something of that sort. But in this case, you'll be loading up all of your files in the portal, and that'll be a place where we, both you and the team, can see what those files are and if any are missing, if we need to make corrections on them. In the portal, we also have our areas where we can make comments where there may be information missing that we can ask you to clarify or redo or revisit before we actually approve your grant proposal. There are templates in there. Like I said, I just went over what those required templates are. We'll see what they are if you haven't had a chance. And once you finish completing one or two forms and then uploading other forms, then you'll be able to submit drafts for review by the team. And when they are drafts, we can communicate back with comments and go back and forth until we are all on the same page about what the content is and clarification on budget and other numbers. When you submit and when our portal is in perfect shape, we will be able to send to the authorized person who will do your, who's over the grants, an email where they can do an electronic signature. We'll get that anyway, but that'll be after we download all of the files when they're in the order that we like them to be. And we will send that to you via email at this time and then get your digital signature for approval. So that's our process. When you go to fcsua.force.com, this is what you'll see. And we're going to go into that in a minute. And one of the things that we want to remind you of when you go, you actually have to, you'll see several things in the portal, but key is your institutional profile with contacts. You can't do anything without getting that information in. And then additionally, if you're wanting to submit a grant proposal, you will not be able to submit a grant proposal until you have at least a draft of your application. And there are minimum requirements with that, with the application that you must do, but you will not be able to jump directly to grants after a profile of your institution, if a profile of your institution has not been submitted or completed. And we'll take a look at what that looks like. When you first log in, you'll see a visual like this. And once you see that visual there, you'll notice there's a little button down below that says save. I want to talk about some of those submission buttons. You'll see save, and that means that you're just keeping what you have. Perhaps you're not finished and you want to come back. You need to look up some information just like anything else. You'll have submit draft for FCSUA review. That means you want us to take a look, and or you'll have a draft for submit for FCSUA approval. And that's typically after we've worked with you and gone back and forth over any of the language or terms that we want to make sure are clear. And then we will make a recommendation that you submit that. And within the center, that's where we do the approval. And once we have all of the information submitted for approval, then we'll move it through this process at UCF, and it doesn't go outside of UCF. You may see that the status of those submissions as you hit save, submit for review, that you'll get these types of, this will give you an idea of the status of. If you submit for FCSUA to review your information, you will not be able to make any changes other than uploading your documents. You can always upload your documents. But when it's under review, we are actually looking at your proposal and then go back and make suggestions for you. And then, of course, when you submit it, you're looking for our approval, and then we will submit it for our approval. Let you know where that is once we have all documents. So we'll go into the portal. And Claudia is going to take over and kind of get us there. And then I'll get back on my end. Let's see.
Okay. Janice, we have a question. Would you like me to ask that now or wait till the end?
You can go ahead and ask now. Claudia, are you taking over now? Because I see I have.
Okay.
Yeah, let me.
The question is, should all sections of the draft be completed before submitting? In other words, let's say the index isn't done, but the narrative is. So can documents be submitted? Can the documents be uploaded, I guess, really uploaded and submitted, and then submit for review before all documents are in the portal?
Yeah, as long as you have, again, you have a list of what those required documents are, and they may be in draft version, but yes, you can submit them and we can take a look at those. But if you don't have those areas, all of those areas in there, with the exception of the reference, then it won't let you submit it. So that's how it's set up right now. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, Claudia, thank you.
Okay, this is the screen. Are you able to see the screen?
I do, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this is the screen that you will see once you logged in the portal. So this is the institutional profile. So here in this screen lives all the information about the institution. Also the
I don't
contact.
think we're seeing
wait a minute.
that.
I don't
We're
see
not
it.
seeing that. We're not seeing that, Claudia.
Okay.
I saw something else. There.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as well as the institutional information, you will also have access to enter your contacts for your institution. For those that were part of our previous webinar, when we talked about the application, we created a Fate account under the portal, so we can show you how the portal looks. And we already have the primary program contact and the institution president, because these two roles are required in order to create an application. We create the account, so we entered. So we create the account for the institution, and we enter the information for the primary program contact per your request. But once you log in here for the first time, if you're going to work on your application, the institution president is required to work on your application. When is the time to work on the grants? This is what will happen. So once you logged in, you will get directed to the institutional profile, and this warning message will come up. It's actually letting you know that there are some other roles that are required in order for you to work on the grant proposal, which are the authorized official, the administrative contact, the financial contact, and the principal investigator. And if I try to click on the FPCTP grants tab up here, it won't let me go in. It will take me back to the institutional profile. So that let me know that this is required. So the next step will be to create all these contacts in here. And what I'm gonna do is actually, I'm going to create just one, and I'm going to assign this role to just one person, and that will actually help me to show you that it is possible, because we have seen that in some institutions, one person, one contact, it's assigned with multiple roles. So let's go ahead and do that and enter the grants roles. Once you click new, let's create William. Webinar. So let's add a phone number. I said it's a required field. Same with the email address and the title. These are the required fields. We always encourage to have all this information up to date. As a primary parent contact or person with the login, with access to login to the portal, they can always edit this information. So it's always, it's possible, and it's good to have the most recent contact related to all these roles to your institution. So let's say that William is going to be the grant authorized official, but he's also going to be the other role. So we save sometimes here. The way to do that is you select one, and if you can see here, there is an information action here. It says hold down the control key. So you just hold down the control key and you select as many contacts as you want. And you click save. And now we have William Webinar as the person with the roles related to the grants. And as we click now on the FPCTP grants, now we are able to come to this tab and actually start working on the grant proposal.
Okay, and I should have that refreshed. So mine's not showing refresh. Let's see that. And so here we are, and I clicked refresh, and it's not moving, Claudia. Do I need to come out?
Yeah, I will say refresh your page, the entire tab.
Okay.
Up there, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, go click on the FPCTP grants tab. There you go.
All right. And do I need to refresh here?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so we will add new. And one that we are looking at is one Claudia just created. Look at what happens when I click on webinar. This is a good sign because you start wondering, what is going on? Well, when you do that, it has a, you can't go anywhere until you read the instructions. And so you have to click to say that you have read the instructions, or click on the download of the documents, and you have the instructions. You also have this one. And then you can click here to say, I have read the documents. And then do you go down here and would I need to save at this time, Claudia, or will it let me in without saving?
One important detail, as you mentioned before, is that you won't be able to save your grant proposal unless you have an application in a draft, at least in a draft status. So if we go to section 1, there is a question that asks for the name of your FPCTP name.
Mm-hmm.
It's the question 11. And if you click at the icon that says information next to it, it was please enter the proposed Florida post-secondary.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. I'm not.
Yeah, and in order to do this demo, what I did was I create an application, and
Mm-hmm.
it's called Webinar Demo Project. So if you type webinar, the application will pop up, and that will happen, you know, across all the institutions that already have an application created.
Okay.
So it will associate this grant proposal to their FPCTP application.
Okay. And at this point, do we click save or goes directly to it?
You can click save. Not all the fields are required,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, through the revision process, of course, we encourage for them to have all the fields necessary.
And so once we're in the grant proposal areas, you'll notice that we have field grant information, and we have required proposal documents. So when we go back to field grant information, that's here. That's that information that you will include. We'll also have a form that, a Word form that you will complete when we compile the entire proposal that has the same information, your institution, employer ID, your DUNS number, and so on. So all of that will need to be included. You'll notice here we have a drop-down menu where you would indicate whether this is a startup or an enhancement grant. So we'll choose startup because when we think about the startup, both will show different information. The enhancement grant has just a slight different information, again, where you have to address the outcomes of your students, elaborate on that. Excuse me, but other than that, you will do that. Notice there's a calendar that where you can select when you would actually like for your grant to start. We'll say we want it to start in January. And maybe we want a 2-year grant. Excuse me. So you can make that decision about how long you're anticipating for your startup grant that you would like. Of course, you would have written your budget and you can say over that period of time, you want $550,000, just an arbitrary number. And I think you get the idea. Additional information about whether your institution is registered or not with SAP, you will answer each one of those questions looking at the drop-down menu. Excuse me. And as far as forms go, that will have all of what you need for that under this. We'll save for now. And then we'll go to what are the required documents. So go over here, and then you will upload those. So here we have an opportunity to look at all of the required documents. You download them. Now, the interesting thing is it will come as a zip file. Of course, I have to unload it on my end. Excuse me. And what we've prepared, what has been prepared is a template for each one of the required documents, and along with your instructions with the required components. But let's look at the logic model. So our first one is the logic model. So you have a template of what that should look like. So it comes as a Word document for you to complete it. And again, you start looking at what are your 3 goals or your 4 goals, however many goals you have. What are the inputs that are already in place, the types of activities through long-term outputs. Now I will pull up a template for that. So let's see. Of course, everyone I click on is not working. There we go. Not the right one. And so here's an example. So for each one of the templates, there are some examples provided to give you an idea of what the expectations are. Of course, you'll look at the instructions and you'll look at the rubric that we use in looking at how your narrative is written. You'll have these templates that you'll work through that really within your narrative will be an elaboration of each one of your templates. Okay.
Janice,
yes.
I wanted to mention that they don't need to have access for those that are new or institutions trying to apply. We also have all these documents in a zip file on our website. Mm-hmm. So if they want to take a look ahead of time, they're also available on their post-secondary institution sections in our website.
Most definitely. Thank you. Our next one is a template with an evaluation template. As we look at how you might line out, and we want you to use the templates as you complete your information, how you line out your goals, in a formative and in a summative format, which you would have addressed in looking at your logic model, then how will you lay out the evaluation of each one of those? And the nice thing is you could fill in from there. All right, let's see, next. You have the grant budget. Let's pull that over. So this is a template. I think I need to enlarge that. Not that big. That lays out how you will write your proposed, the areas where you will write the proposed budgets, and where you can put in formulas for that can be automatically done within Excel. And actually, once grants are approved, proposals are approved, we actually send you invoice templates, disbursement templates. We have a variety that we'd like for you to use in order to make sure that we are communicating with the same type of documents. So that's an example. And then we have justification. So with your budget, many of you are familiar with justifying why your budget. Now this one is written with a total amount of $299,000, but it looks at each one of the areas that was on the actual budget sheet to see how we will justify personnel, fringe benefits. Again, this is sort of like an elaboration of what you actually put on the budget Excel file. So we have that one. I think it's one more. I think we did that one. Did I miss one? I think I got them all, right?
Yeah, I think you got
Yeah,
I think I have them all. I'm just checking through. Justification, grant. And so each one of those would be, again, loaded up into our actual portal. So we go back, and it's pretty easy where you have each one will go according to the other would be what other additional support you have, references. Each area have their own place for you to upload your documents, which makes it easy for us to follow. I know when you go through the application side of the portal, things are a little more complicated, but this, and for our grant proposal, makes it pretty easy. And that's our portal. So let's see. Is there anything that I'm thinking? I think I have everything. So this is great. We can see if you have any specific questions that we can answer or address.
You can either, participants, you can either unmute yourself if you're muted, which means just simply in the box where you are, there should be, if you put the cursor in the box, you should see either mute or unmute to unmute yourself, or if you'd like to write the question in the chat box, again, the chat box is down at the bottom of your screen, and there's an icon there for chat, either way.
One thing to keep in mind is that grants could be submitted at any time. We just keep that time frame window in mind of when it can actually start. But yes, you can think about the rotation when you're ready. We have had institutions to submit an application, be approved and then later apply for the grant. One of the things that we like to do is we like to work with you on your application at the same time that we're working on the grant proposal. Since the application has to go to Tallahassee, that takes a little more time and include external people beyond UCF. Whereas when we look at the grant proposals, those are something that we can handle in-house without external, other than our Office of Research with both institutions. But we like to work on them together in order to be able to say that we can announce the startup of your program at the same time of your grant, but not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to happen that way. Okay.
I want to remind everyone that we have uploaded a PDF version of the slides from today's webinar over in the chat box. And so if you just click on that, you can download the presentation. We also have entered a link to the evaluation for today's webinar, and we would appreciate if you would take a few minutes and provide an evaluation on today's webinar. And also you'll be receiving an email tomorrow with the slides from today's presentation, as well as a link to that evaluation, asking you to complete those if you registered for the webinar. So please feel free to either speak up or to share your questions in the chat box.
I see a question. Are the annual reports also uploaded to the portal when submitting? For those who have approved programs and are getting ready to submit the annual reports, that's our desire. For those of you who are currently programs, you know that we're working on our portal, our online portal, to get in the shape that we thought it would be in. Right now, you will be submitting those via email as you've done in the past.
Other questions that folks may have.
Hi, I have a question. In writing the renewal application, there's a section that talks about general honors, endorsements, or degrees specific to the FPTP. I wanted to make sure that those were more specialized things being offered to the students, not necessarily open to the general population.
Yes, when we're talking about applications, yes, when we're that for the FPCTP, what is it that your institution would offer for students exiting your program? And in some cases, people may be having access to whatever is offered to the general student population, but most of our programs have identified a credential that signifies that they have exited, a credential from the FPCTP that your institution has developed. Did I answer your question, Vivian? Thank you.
Thank you, Janice.
No problem.
Other questions that anyone might have? Well, we would like to thank those who presented today in the webinar, and we hope that you found this information valuable. It is an overview, so remember that we are always available. Although we are all working remotely, you can you can send an email, you can call our office phones and it will direct a message to, or call our computers and we can speak to you that way. Or we're happy to share our personal, our cell phone numbers with you. Well, I am, because I'm not able to get on Skype. So I'm happy for you to have my cell phone number if you need to call me for any information. So we hope that you found this information valuable today. I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Just a quick comment. I think Brady better come up for air. His bubbles are getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah. It's good to see everyone. And thank you. And we'll look for your questions and hope for and your proposals. along with your applications, and hope that you continue to stay safe as we figure out what's happening through these uncertain times. But do know that the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities team is always here, and we're in this with you together. So we're all in it together. So stay safe, and we'll hear from you soon. Bye-bye.